West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Trump's insurrection impeachment lawyer, David Schoen, insisted that Trump opposed that violence, that Trump's words were merely encouraging those armed fans to engage in peaceful and civic action, not storming the Capitol violently.
President Trump did not incite the horrific, terrible riots of January 6th. The violence and looting goes against the law and order message he conveyed to every citizen of the United States throughout his presidency, including on January 6th. You knew what the president really meant. He meant that the crowd should demand action from members of Congress and support primary challenges to those who don't do what he considered to be right.
Did then President Trump's request boil down to supporting only primary challenges? That is not what those now convicted Trump fans believed. They were chanting the president sent them. It's not what the militias believed. It's not what top Trump aides believed, as they wrote down and admitted plots to overturn the lawful election result, not just support primary candidates in the future. And apparently it is not what Trump believed. After that trial, after that remark was made, Donald Trump went on to vow pardons for the criminal trespassers and violent criminals, a lawless endorsement of their actual crimes on his apparent behalf. He said if he wins again, he would issue those pardons in the future. So whatever one thought or claimed then, this is the kind of defense that did not age well, especially against the over 150 pages of new evidence released Monday, with more of this January 6th report slated to come out tomorrow. If Trump aides or Trump himself face indictments on this evidence, they'll need a lot more than talk of primary challenges, or that he always supported law and order, as his fans battered police, and then he vowed to pardon them after they did that. Makes you wonder what that insurrection impeachment lawyer would say right now. And we aim to go to the source around here, and we turn now to Trump impeachment defense lawyer David Schoen, a criminal defense and civil rights lawyer, who's represented Trump aide Steve Bannon as well. Welcome, David. Trump was not talking about primary challenges that day. He vows pardons for people who stormed the Capitol. How do you respond to all of this damning evidence now?
I think some of the response will be just what it was then. I think we'll be pointing to the words of his speech in which he called for peaceful demonstrations. That always seems to be omitted from the story.
Then why pardon the violent ones?
I don't know that he would pardon the violent ones, quite frankly.
He vowed to pardon them.
Can I? Yeah, well, he'll pardon those. If he is in that position again, he'll pardon the people who he believes deserve being pardoned. Listen, a premise to all of this is, of course, I understand that Donald Trump believes with his heart and soul that the election was stolen from him, and he acted based on that belief of his.
We can get into that belief. I just want to get you on the record. We can get into that belief. We have time. But just on that point, vowing to pardon the people who stormed the Capitol the special people, as he said, is a long ways from your claim that this was about supporting future primary challenges, is it not?
If you're talking about people who committed violence that day, that's a different story. He doesn't believe that all of the people who, what you call, stormed the Capitol that day committed violent acts. And so he would differentiate between the two of them. Listen,
right, well,
I can't speak 100% today.
Let's pick on that, and then I'll let you continue. You're saying what I said, storm. No. What the federal courts have convicted in over 400 cases is breaking the law. I imagine as a lawyer, you don't support people breaking federal criminal law to go into the Capitol during the certification. You don't support that. That's what I'm referring to. Why pardon that? How do you defend that?
Well, first of all, a pardon wouldn't be triggered unless someone had been convicted, as you well know. But
no, you can have a preemptive pardon. If you want to talk law with me, you can have a preemptive pardon. You don't have to wait for conviction.
You can have a preemptive pardon. That's right. That's right.
Go on.
Anyway, so I can only go back to the same point I've made. He would distinguish between those people who committed violence and those people who didn't, those people who were caught up in it. Many people pled guilty because they were incarcerated for a long period of time. They thought unfairly. And so pleading guilty was a better course of action to them, but they didn't commit acts of violence. Those are the kind of people I think would be,
but that's not, again, I don't want to over-lawyer it, but that's not supporting a primary challenge in a future election, is it?
That's not, but saying that he would support a primary challenge in a future election is saying that he supports a primary challenge in a future election. You're taking two different quotes. One, the fact that he would support a pardon doesn't mean that he wouldn't also support the lawful process of a primary challenge.
Yes, but what's important for the record is in the insurrection impeachment defense, you made the claim that his words that day were only about fighting those primary challenges. That didn't turn out to be true.
Well, I didn't say they were only about that. What I said is, though, and I stand by this, in his speech, he called for peaceful demonstrations. That can't be, we can't just overlook and pick and choose with the speech. Now, how other people took that also is beyond his control. But I'd like to just back up 1 second, something that's, to me, a broader point on your story tonight. And I know you may object to it, and please, I know you won't hesitate to tell me so. I think that part of what has to be said here is that it's the process that happened here that many people are offended by. If, as I believe, and I know you do, the events of January 6th were significant events in our history, momentous events in our history, then I believe the American people deserved a full and fair investigation by a conflict-free, independent body. Now, you can say Mr. McCarthy screwed up with that also. I might agree with that. But of all people on earth, why choose Chairman Thompson to head up this investigative committee when he filed a lawsuit personally attacking President Trump and saying that he was responsible?
I understand that you have issues with the committee.
I'd like to make the point.
The evidence. Well, finish your point, sir. I understand. People are familiar with this point. You don't like the committee's investigation. But we want to talk about the evidence, not whether you want to impugn a bipartisan committee. But go ahead and finish your point, sir.
There's nothing bipartisan about this committee, first of all. But secondly, no, what I say is of all of the people who are possible candidates, Chairman Thompson had a lawsuit just before he became chairman, specifically about the events of January 6th, specifically accusing President Trump of causing him personal injuries. How on earth can you expect the American public to accept that as a fair chairman of an investigation?
David.
Raskin and Schiff have written books.
I thought you were going to go somewhere more credible. If there is a violent attack,
that's not credible. Is there anything about that that's not a fact?
If there's a violent attack on Congress, sir, that is led and summoned by the then outgoing loser of the election, then President Trump, then everyone in Congress is going to have a stake in that. And you're suggesting that a co-equal branch should be conflicted out because the Trump fans who battered the police and went into the Congress, and you're trying to play word games about the vow to pardon them. That is a conflict for Congress. I find that not credible. That's the nicest way I can say it. Let me point
you to some... It's a conflict for Chairman Thompson
let me point
specifically.
You to some evidence.
It's a chairman for Raskin and Schiff who have written books about...
Let me point you to some evidence.
I didn't make the point. You perverted the point that I made.
No,
you said that I said Congress was conflicted. I spoke about the specific members who were chosen to... And Schiff and Raskin. They've written books about the events. They have a personal interest in hawking those books and ensuring that the committee comes out with
You made that point, and you got a factual counterpoint, and people heard it. Let's look at some evidence. January 2nd, Donald Trump was on the phone with Jim Jordan and others, according to this new evidence we have from the committee, and they were planning this march to the Capitol, but they also wanted to keep it secret, so they had the element of surprise. Knowing that now, I assume you didn't know that when you argued the case, but knowing that now, is it incriminating for Donald Trump that he planned to move these people from the ellipse to the Capitol and to do so in a way that would be a surprise to his own government, to his own federal government, to the security services? Why keep that secret? Isn't that damning?
I don't necessarily accept the factual premise, but even if it were accurate and that phone call happened and that was the plan, no, I think it's consistent with his call for peaceable demonstrations. Again,
why keep it a secret?
He believed the election was stolen from him.
But you know it was a secret because they didn't announce it. The evidence shows in text, in writing, Trump aides. I mean, you can conflict what you want, but they were writing about how the president wants to do this but wants to keep it a surprise. So why keep it a secret?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't consider it to be damning that it was kept a surprise, if it were kept a surprise.
Okay. Let me play you Cassie Hutchinson. This made a lot of waves, and it seemed to suggest that, again, Donald Trump was physically clashing with his own aides trying to get to the Capitol. He wanted to get to the Capitol. There's texts that also support the general thrust of this. Take a listen to Cassie Hutchinson's testimony.
The president said something to the effect of, "I'm the effing president. Take me up to the Capitol now." The president reached up towards the front of the vehicle to grab at the steering wheel. Mr. Trump then used his free hand to lunge towards Bobby Engel.
Was it wrong for the president to try to get to the Capitol, given what he knew about armed supporters and then what was unfolding there?
With all due respect to Ms. Hutchinson, what's wrong is for the American people to be presented with testimony that's not subject to cross-examination. As I would imagine you know, there's a dispute about what happened during those events. This is the problem with not having a ranking minority member on a committee. There's no insulation. There's no cross-examination. There's no testing of credibility. So I don't accept as true any testimony that's not subject to cross-examination. That's part of why I say the process is so important.
Let me ask you, because you also represented Steve Bannon, by that logic, if this is something where you want other views in there, why not have more individuals cooperate? About 30 people pled the Fifth Amendment, which is their constitutional right, but also raises questions about the other claim you're making. You know, a lot of your arguments seem to go on both sides. It's like, well, there should be more testimony, but you're representing people who took great legal risks to avoid cooperating.
Well, I didn't say there should be more testimony there. I said there should be cross-examination. People didn't cooperate, many of them, because they felt the committee was a complete sham, a political show trial. By the way, not just those people. Last month, the Washington Post reported that the committee staffers were complaining that Representative Cheney was making this Cheney 2024 campaign, that the focus was singularly on Donald Trump rather than on fact-finding. 2 days ago, ABC reported Liz Cheney said the goal is to get Donald Trump from ever holding office again. And you said earlier that the mainstream media seems to be ignoring it now or not speaking out so loudly. Wall Street Journal spoke out pretty loudly about it today when they said this risks taking the scourge of criminalizing political differences to new heights. That's a pretty strong statement.
Well, I think one
that's
issue,
part of my answer.
I appreciate you. Look, I appreciate you taking the questions here as someone who's defended Trump in the impeachment process. But when you keep attacking process and the committee, you seem like you don't want to discuss the evidence.
It is Wednesday, the 21st of December of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid us of these meddlesome priests? No one. And yes, as we just complete the whole theme here, do not be concerned. We are not wishing any untoward actions upon those that are meddlesome. But let us take note. We are talking about a lovely egg dish with a velvety hollandaise sauce smothered all over it. Okay? You can take meaning any way you want. But that's what we do here at this salon, don't we? Take meaning wherever we want. Oh, wow. You know, the metaphysics that have been arising on this this time period is getting quite meddlesome, isn't it? Yes, it is. Well, we're in the middle of the week, marching irrevocably on to Christmas Day. We're in the Hanukkah period. And then I guess then Christmas Day comes up and the holidays continue. All right. this is a good time of year because actually there's holidays all around the world with all sorts of different kinds of foodstuffs. That's what I like. Foodstuffs. Oh, so at the top, just to, I don't know, put not such a fine point upon it, but Ari Melber and David Schoen's little tete-a-tete. Now, I just want to say that sometimes I get a little perturbed because Ari Melber brings on these, I don't know, deplorables. I hate them. You know, just do not give them a platform. But Ari Melber is being a journalist, and he is a damn good one. And I got to say, it's pretty good to be a lawyer, too, in the midst of it, or at least a lawyerly mind. I think he was NBC's legal counsel in some capacity before he started doing a show. But I just thought that was a very effective takedown of that impeachment insurrection lawyer. Yeah, David Schoen. I just love how it's like, oh, well, you know, if your feelings cause you to believe a certain way, well, then you can't be held criminally liable. So then are you saying there's some diminished capacity here? Because that's what you're arguing. Feelings. Yeah, I felt that this person robbed me, so I went over there and killed him. And then took the stuff. Was it yours? No, but, you know, I took what was equal to what I should have gotten. Maybe a little bit more. Feelings is not going to save you in court. Well, maybe it will with this guy. It seems to have worked all this time. I don't know. Spoiled rich boy. I hated that guy growing up. You know, because he was, you know, he's around our age. Well, a little bit older, but still. At least for me. That was not what I was going to model myself after. And I started reading Art of the Deal. And everybody knew it was ghostwritten because this guy was a dimwit. Please. Writing a book. The guy had no patience to do that. Look at him. Which kind of makes me wonder, what the hell is Elon Musk being propped up as being a great businessman and visionary? He had a bunch of money acquired from apartheid blood emeralds. Let's not forget that. I guess maybe I'm belaboring that point, but I'd like to. Over and over and over. I want to just make it stick. The heir to an apartheid blood emerald fortune. That'll give you a leg up. What? You know what? Even Degrassi, the TV scientist, is onto this jag about Elon. I like to call him Ellen. To me, it's Elon, Ellen. I like to say Ellen, just because that's just me. But I suppose it's really Elon. Well, old Elon is still being propped up as being this great visionary who, you know, brought electric cars to the world. Well, actually, you know, electric cars are back there during when the internal combustion engine first started, but there was a little bit of elbow work involved, and that's how we started using gas. So, old Neil deGrasse forgot about that. So, Elon bought Tesla, and then he kicked out the people who developed the technology. And I presume he did the same with SpaceX. No one's happy at either one of those companies. And I'm not talking about since he's been doing this BS with Twitter and tanked all of their pensions. Yeah, that's how it works. Oh, I have no idea where I was going before I got onto the Elon jag. But, Trump. Something about Trump. Anyway. And David Schoen, of course. So, beliefs, feelings. He just believed that the election was stolen from him. So, he had no choice but to, send a mob to try to kill the vice president and maybe even Nancy. Whichever came first. So, I have a feeling that this guy's a little bit more than just a seditious insurgent. I think that these taxes, because what we're hearing now says, there's just no way to tell if there's any foreign influence on this. Oh, really? I think that means that there is. That's the part they're not going to let us know about. If they're going to hold back the CIA's involvement in the JFK assassination after all these years. And look, their involvement could have just been by mistake. They could have gotten, a pre-Whitey Bulger involved in this, and we know who that would have been. And sometimes those guys freelance, right? So they could have just blamed it on that, and I think people would have said, you play with fire, sometimes you play with fire, and that really sucks. If they're not going to let us know that, do you really think they're going to let us know if Donald Trump is... he's going to give a speech saying the American people need to know their president's not a spy. Yeah, well, from crook to spy, it's all the same, isn't it, in these a-go-go times? Oh, my God. Okay. Well, Ari Melber had a great takedown of that guy. And I have to say, in spite of my feelings about having David Schoen on, it turned out pretty damn good. So you can't just go by your feelings. Sometimes you have to go by the evidence. Alrighty. Well, I shall not continue with any more ranting. There's not enough to rant about, I got to tell you. And I'll probably remember more about what to rant about because when I do my French press coffee, I only get like 2.5 of my cups instead of the a little bit more than 3. And I miss that other part, that last third plus. So, I will remember what to rant about later. But for now, why don't we actually get into the reads that we have curated? Because we, in the royal we, I have to say, take the time. Not always just the royal we. It's actually a literal we, like more than me. And we take the time to actually curate a show because of the events of the day around the world. So as we begin here on the rest of the menu in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, a rule delay by the Treasury Department makes a big EV tax credit possible by early next year. Well, that's good news. And even more good news, Meta, Facebook, Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg took the witness stand in an FTC antitrust case. And after intense prodding by the Biden administration, the Postal Service pledged a move to an all-electric delivery fleet. How is DeJoy still there? I don't know, but he still is, but at least they prodded him. I think a little bit of, shall we say, elbow work might have been involved. After the break, we move to the chef's table where Afghanistan's Taliban rulers banned women students from attending universities effective immediately. And in an unprecedented move against Spain's leftist coalition government, the country's top court handed down a ruling preventing the upper house of Parliament from debating and voting. Wow, coming to an America near you. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link. And the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, who is quite a busy person in her real life. And we thank Kelly for doing everything that she does here at this little powerhouse of resistance we call Netroots Radio. If you would look across the page at our homepage at netrootsradio.com, near the bottom there, across to the left, from that chat room link, you will then notice the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio and maybe send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink. You know how the prices always go up, but they never go down? I apologize for that. That's what we experience with bills here. But anyway, if you could afford to send us what you have to spend now for an espresso-type coffee drink, if you could send those funds once a month, I'll get to it. It will help us truly, all kidding aside, it does help us pay our bills, and they are ever increasing. So thank you to those of you who have been so generous over these many years. We need the help, and thank you for the help. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, such as Twitter is these days, do so at Netroots Radio. I should look. Maybe Tom has put. Maybe that would get us kicked off of Twitter sooner if we put our Mastodon address. But look for us on Mastodon at Netroots Radio, at Mastodon, whatever. But we'll get those links available for other platforms that we happen to be on. So do follow us, though, on Twitter at Netroots Radio. I mentioned Tom, and he takes care of that and a lot more because he's very busy in his private life as well. And thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter, and I will get a Mastodon account, I promise. And but do follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos 10 minutes before showtime. And, of course, that's where the full articles are. Sometimes we add, sometimes we subtract, but that's where you can find the real reportage. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe is out of the Associated Press, and the journalists who have penned this are Hope Yen and Tom Kreischer. People who want to buy an electric vehicle could get a bigger than expected tax credit come January 1st because of a delay by the Treasury Department in drawing up rules for tax breaks. The department said it won't finish the rules that govern where battery minerals and parts have to be sourced until sometime in March. As a result, it appears that buyers of EVs assembled in North America with batteries made in the U.S., Canada, or Mexico will be eligible for a full $7,500 tax credit under the Inflation Reduction Act. The act calls for the batteries, minerals, and parts to also come from North America or a country with a free trade agreement with the U.S. in order to get the full tax break, but that provision has been temporarily put on hold. The auto industry is watching the situation closely, but it could cause a rush to dealers because most, if not all, EVs are not expected to qualify for the full credit when the rules are all in place. Experts say most automakers won't be able to comply with requirements that the battery components come from North America or a country with a U.S. free trade agreement, for instance. General Motors has said that it expects its EVs to get only half the tax credit, or $3,750, until at least 2025. So people who buy early next year, before the rules are announced, could pocket an extra $3,750. I imagine there will be a rush on EV dealers to get the extra savings, said Sam Al-Bulsamid, principal e-mobility analyst with Guidehouse Research. In the meantime, Treasury said it will release information by year's end on the anticipated direction of the rules to help automakers identify eligible EVs, the department said in a statement, but the rules won't be effective until March. Tatate of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Facebook's parent company Meta, took the witness stand yesterday, Tuesday, in a trial over U.S. antitrust regulators' effort to stop the tech giant from buying a virtual reality startup called Within Unlimited. At issue is whether Meta's acquisition of a small company that makes a VR fitness app called Supernatural will hurt competition in the emerging virtual reality market. If the deal is allowed to go through, the Federal Trade Commission argues it would violate antitrust laws and dampen innovation, hurting consumers who may face higher prices and fewer options outside platforms controlled by Meta Platforms, Inc. Meta, meanwhile, wants to poke holes in the FTC's argument that there even exists a distinct market for what the FTC calls virtual reality dedicated fitness apps. During his testimony at the trial in San Jose, California, Zuckerberg seemed to play down the notion that fitness is a distinct top category in virtual reality. He said while fitness is one use case for virtual reality, other uses, namely games, communications, and socializing and work, have been the primary ones that Meta has been focusing on. You know, you never get any legs at Meta, though. They got the upper part of your body, but they haven't figured out how to give you legs. Whether or not virtual reality fitness apps are a distinct market is key in the case because the FTC is arguing that Meta's entry into this space through the Within acquisition would stifle competition. If there's no defined market, it becomes more difficult to prove that case. The FTC, however, argues that not only is Meta a potential entrant into this market, but that it had the resources and ability to create its own virtual reality fitness app instead of acquiring the top independent player in the market. FTC lawyer Abby Dennis pointed out that in Facebook's early days, the company Zuckerberg founded in his Harvard dorm room rejected acquisition offers from a host of big tech companies, including Google, Yahoo, and Microsoft. You would agree with me that Facebook continued to successfully innovate, even though it never got acquired? She asked Zuckerberg, who replied affirmatively. And the reason why Facebook has been able to succeed for 20 years is because it continues to innovate even though it never got acquired, she continued. And Zuckerberg responded, yes. Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. In a major boost for President Joe Biden's pledge to eliminate gas-powered vehicles from the sprawling federal fleet, the Postal Service said yesterday, Tuesday, it will sharply increase the number of electric-powered delivery trucks and will go all electric for new purchases starting in 2026. The post office said it is spending nearly $10 billion to electrify its aging fleet, including installing a modern charging infrastructure at hundreds of postal facilities nationwide and purchasing at least 66,000 electric vehicle delivery trucks in the next 5 years. The spending includes $3 billion in funding approved under a landmark climate and health policy adopted by Congress last year. The White House hailed the announcement as a way to sustain reliable mail service to Americans while modernizing the fleet, reducing operating costs, and clearing the air in neighborhoods across the country. The U.S. government operates the largest vehicle fleet in the world, and the Postal Service is the largest fleet in the federal government, with more than 220,000 vehicles, one-third of the overall U.S. fleet. The USPS announcement sets the bar for the rest of the federal government, and more importantly, the rest of the world, said Brenda Mallory, chair of the White House Council on Environmental Quality. Postmaster General Louis DeJoy, who came under fire for an initial plan that included purchasing thousands of gas-powered trucks, said the Postal Service is required by law to deliver mail and packages to 163 million addresses 6 days a week and to cover its costs in doing so. As I have said in the past, if we can achieve those objectives in a more environmentally responsible way, we will do so. The new fleet plan is operationally suitable, financially viable, and climate-friendly, Joy said at a news conference outside Postal Service headquarters. Well, let us now get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, good for dieting. As we know, growing up's not easy. However, growing up while having an uncontrollable desire to devour human flesh is arguably even harder, which is basically the storyline in director Luca Guadagnino's latest. Set in the late 80s, Bones and All tells the story of Marin, Taylor Russell, who finds herself on her own after her only parent abandons her shortly after her 18th birthday. As we learn from a tape he leaves her by way of explanation, her father learned about her cravings at a young age and hoped in vain that she'd grow out of it. Armed only with her birth certificate, Marin is determined to track down her long-estranged mother, whom she suspects may suffer from the same affliction. On the way from Virginia to Minnesota to meet her, she encounters two other cannibals, the creepy Sully, played to a T by Mark Rylance at his best, and Lee, a troubled young man who becomes her boyfriend. As Marin learns, cannibals vary in their approach to sating their hunger. Sully claims he only feasts on the dead or dying, whereas Lee, played by Timothée Chalamet, feeds randomly. However, the one thing they all share is that they and most of their victims live on the fringes of society, which would condemn their actions if they were noticed. With this in mind, it's easy to see their cannibalism as a metaphor for marginalization, and why the film is set in Reagan's America, a time of homophobia, AIDS, and a culture where appearances of normality matter more than individual happiness. Superimpose the coming-of-age story, and it's easy to see why some have dubbed this one as an alternative Romeo and Juliet. Some additional character development could have helped, and maybe some editing of the gore, but Bones and All is nonetheless a hearty and original tale. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Karen Hopkin. Ever get the feeling that your cat is judging you? Well, you're in for a surprise, because it's actually your pooch who might be viewing you with a critical eye. That's according to a study that shows that dogs can assess human aptitude and will look toward people who seem to know what they're doing. The work appears in the journal Behavioral Processes.
Our aim was to test whether dogs are sensitive to humans' competence levels and whether they evaluate humans on this trait.
Hitomi Chijiwa is an assistant professor at Osaka University. If critiquing people's proficiency seems an odd job for a pup, it may not be all that far-fetched. Canines have spent more than 10,000 years by our sides.
So, dogs are highly sensitive to human behavior.
And they pay particular attention to things like how cooperative we are.
For example, our previous study showed that dogs avoid people who refuse to help their owner.
So Chijiwa and her colleagues got to wondering whether dogs might also rate us in terms of our skillfulness, particularly if those skills might come in handy for our four-footed little friends. So they set up a simple experiment.
We showed 60 dogs, 2 persons manipulating transparent containers. One person is competent.
That person was able to pop open the top after just a couple of twists.
Whereas the other person is incompetent and they failed at this task.
That person tried to open the lid and then gave up. The actors repeated the performance on a second container with the same results. The competent person succeeded, the other not so much. Then the researchers handed both actors a third container. In some trials, this container was empty. In others, it contained a treat. And what they found was that female dogs spent more time gazing expectantly at the person who had previously demonstrated container opening know-how.
And they were more likely to approach the competent person.
But only when they thought they might get free food.
Dogs in the empty condition showed no preferences.
Although one little cutie with a bow on her head did bark at all the containers, regardless of their contents. So, why would females be more censorious observers of people's performances than males?
Females' superiority in the social cognitive domain has been reported across many mammalian species, including humans.
In other words, in many cognitive studies, furry females seem to show a higher social IQ than mammalian males. And sex differences have been seen in other pup studies.
For example, females looked at their owners more frequently and for longer than males when facing unsolvable tasks. And female dogs solved significantly more tasks than males in social learning tasks.
So, next time Fifi looks at you with those puppy dog eyes, you might be thinking, what a good dog. But she might be thinking, you could do better. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Karen Hopkin.
This is an important message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. When it snows this winter, make sure you clear more than your driveway. Before you hit the road and before you get in the driver's seat, check to be sure that your vehicle's tailpipe is clear of snow. If the tailpipe is blocked, carbon monoxide, an odorless, colorless, and deadly gas produced by your engine can build up quickly inside your vehicle, poisoning anyone inside. To learn more, call 1-800-CDC-INFO. That's 1-800-232-4636.
He seems sorry.
We very clearly told him not to look up there.
I'm honestly impressed that he was able to do it.
Right? What, did he balance on that big chair?
Yeah, I mean, I guess he'll just know what his gifts are this year.
I really thought we had hidden them well.
If they can find their presents, they can find a gun.
911, what is your emergency?
Every day, 8 kids and teens are unintentionally killed or injured by loaded and unlocked guns. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and End Family Fire.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Welcome to 60 Seconds Civics from the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. The framers of the Constitution were concerned about two things. First, the emergence of a tyrannical executive in the presidency, and second, a tyranny of a majority in Congress. So they designed a unique and complicated system intended to prevent either forms of tyranny from emerging while still carrying out the responsibilities of a Republican government. To accomplish this goal, the framers created in the Constitution 3 separate governmental institutions at the national level. They gave each a primary responsibility and the authority and powers necessary to carry it out. They gave Congress the primary responsibility and power to make laws. They gave the presidency the primary responsibility and power to implement and enforce the laws made by Congress. Finally, they gave the federal court system, led by the Supreme Court, the primary responsibility and power to manage disputes over the meaning, implementation, and enforcement of the laws and the interpretation of the meaning of the Constitution. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
What happened with the death penalty in 2022? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. In the United States in 2022, 18 people were executed, which, leaving aside the pandemic year, is the fewest number of executions in decades. Also in 2022, the 20 people sentenced to death is the lowest number in half a century. Compare 2022 to 1999, when there were 98 executions and approximately 300 new death sentences. Things have changed since then. As of now, a total of 37 states have either formally abolished the death penalty or not executed anyone in over a decade. Nonetheless, the United States remains one of the minority of nations with capital punishment, along with China, Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and North Korea. Death penalty proponents barely argue any longer that the death penalty makes us safer. It just doesn't. Rather, they argue that vengeance is such an important and legitimate purpose of the criminal system, a value so important that it should outweigh the death penalty's racism and arbitrariness and the fact that it kills innocent people. We disagree, and we have hope, because, as the executive director of the Death Penalty Information Center put it, the decades-long decline in capital punishment shows that the movement away from capital punishment is durable. It is, and it indeed is time. It's past time to end this barbarism. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU, because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1907. At 3:45 that afternoon, the Chilean military opened machine gun fire on a school occupied by striking workers. It's estimated that between 1,000 and 3,000 people died that day in what came to be known as the Santa Maria School Massacre. The early 20th century was a time of great wealth disparity in Chile. Dock workers in the northern city of Iquique went on strike. These workers mostly loaded saltpeter into ships for transport. Saltpeter is a key ingredient in gunpowder. Soon, workers from the nearby saltpeter flats joined the strike. The saltpeter in Chile was controlled mostly by foreign corporations, predominantly British. It was one of the most lucrative Chilean exports. As part of the work action, the strikers occupied the Santa Maria School in Iquique. Chilean President Pedro Montt ordered the strikers be driven out of the city. 400 armed soldiers encircled the workers. They rained machine gun fire on the strikers. Among the dead were women and children, family members of those on strike. The bodies were buried in a mass grave. The exact number of those killed that day is still unknown. In 2007, multiple memorial ceremonies were held in Chile to remember the tragedy. Juan Manuel Diaz, an officer of the United Federation of Workers, the largest trade union in the country, said, "The mass killing was a shameful thing that the Chilean government covered up for a very long time." One way that the memory of the massacre was preserved was through song. In 1969, Luis Advis wrote this cantata to tell the story.
Señoras y señores, venimos a contar aquello que la...
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 36 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs in the low to mid 40s. A tad warmer than what it was yesterday. Foggy conditions currently, and we will have a few flurries or snow showers throughout the day. Winds light and variable. And then cloudy overnight with lows in the mid to upper 30s, winds light and variable. And then cloudy tomorrow, Thursday, with light rain developing later in the late morning and continuing throughout the day, bringing with it tomorrow and tomorrow night about a quarter inch. Highs during the day will be 44 and winds will be light and variable. Pollen is rated as none right outside the window in Rogue River proper. The air quality index is in the good range at 25 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is low at 1. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.32 inches, and so is rain. Rain is falling right now as well. Light rain. Visibility is down to a quarter mile, and relative humidity is at 100%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowdsources from around the world. London is 49 degrees and partly cloudy. Paris is 53 degrees with steady rain. Rome is 52 and mostly cloudy. Kyiv is 32 and cloudy. Kabul is 32 and clear. Hong Kong is 60 degrees and fair. Tokyo is 44 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 56 degrees and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 45 degrees and fair. And New York, New York is 35 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Associated Press staff brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Afghanistan's Taliban rulers banned women students from attending universities, effective immediately in the latest edict, cracking down on women's rights and freedoms. Despite initially promising a more moderate rule respecting rights for women and minorities, the Taliban have widely implemented their strict interpretation of Islamic law, or Sharia. They have banned girls from middle school and high school, restricted women from most employment, and ordered them to wear head-to-toe clothing in public. Women are also banned from parks and gyms. The Taliban were ousted in 2001 by a U.S.-led coalition for harboring al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden, and returned to power after America's chaotic departure last year. And it was only made into chaos because of a poison pill planted by you-know-who. You know, the guy who released 5,000 Taliban fighters, invited Taliban leadership to Camp David. I'm just saying. The decision was announced after a government meeting. A letter shared by the spokesman for the Ministry of Higher Education, Zailua Hashimi, told private and public universities to implement the ban as soon as possible and to inform the ministry once the ban is in place. Hashmi tweeted the letter and confirmed its contents in a message to the AP without giving further details. The decision is certain to hurt efforts by the Taliban to win recognition for potential international donors at a time when the country is mired in a worsening humanitarian crisis. The international community has urged Taliban leaders to reopen schools and give women their right to public space. The university ban comes weeks after Afghan girls took their high school graduation exams, even though they have been banned from classrooms since the Taliban took over the country last year.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Sierra Giles of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Spain's top court handed down a ruling preventing the upper house of Parliament from debating and voting on an amendment to the country's penal code, an unprecedented interference in the legislature that forbears potential political turmoil for the leftist coalition government heading into election year. The Constitutional Court ended a 9-hour debate on Monday by accepting an appeal by the main right-wing opposition Popular Party to halt the passage through Parliament of a reform on how judges are elected to certain judicial bodies, including the Constitutional Court itself. Socialist Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez lashed out at the Popular Party, saying the decision was unprecedented in the 44 years of Spanish democracy, and also in European terms, as it has paralyzed Parliament and affected the renewal of the Constitutional Court, which is demanded by the country's constitution. He said the Popular Party's aim was to retain by spurious means power that the citizens denied them in the elections. Sound familiar? He called for serenity and promised the government would work to break the judicial deadlock with whatever measures were necessary. Critics see the Popular Party appeal as an attack on the Parliament's sovereignty and a move by it to avoid losing influence in the court. The Popular Party, in turn, accused the government of trying to take control of the court in an underhand manner by including the reform as an amendment in an express package that would have limited debate on the matter. The decision, the first of its type in Spain's 4-decade-old democracy, could have untold effects on the future legislation procedures and possibly cause Sanchez headaches as he seeks re-election in 2023. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum.